Jacqueline, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I'm really excited to have you here. I've never really had anybody on the podcast specifically to teach us a little bit about authentic selling. So I'm really excited to hear what you've got to share with us. But before we get there, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure, and I'm delighted that you asked me to be on your podcast. So thank you. And yes, of course, I'm very happy to do that. So as you know, I'm Jacqueline Norton. People call me Jack, so feel free to do that. And I am a sales strategy and pitch coach. So basically, my thing is to coach people how to connect authentically to their kind of messaging, their key messages, and to be able to communicate those effectively to win more business, to build really strong business, ethical business relationships, and to make sure that they are, when in selling situations, not feeling salesy, which we all hate.
Yes, and I can relate to it in more ways than one, because when I started my business, it was one of the hardest things I had to do was, being in that scope of actually knowing that now I've got to sell my services and some of my products even. And it was definitely a hard lesson to go through. So I'm really excited to kind of hear what you've got to bring to the table and learn from you as well. I also want to know, because obviously this is not something that just happened overnight. There is always some kind of drive or passion or motivation behind everybody's journey. What was yours in particular, and how did that transform into where you are now, really?
So if we go back into ancient history, yes, my whole career for the past 25 to 30 years really has been in corporate selling. So I was in IT sales, software services, and network services for many years, working for large corporates, and had quarterly targets, monthly targets, very stressful, very male dominated. And my mindset was really that I didn't really feel that I had a massive imposter syndrome, right, all the way through. But I didn't really feel, although I'd had all the classic sales training that you can have, that I was the same as a lot of the other guys. And, I think a lot of us feel that not the same equals less than. So the massive life lesson there, really. But it really was something that I felt I was good at doing, and I loved clients and solving their problems. For me, selling is solving. But the things I got from my corporate work were great disciplines, really good habits and approaches to things that were what I needed, really, because my mindset really is completely the opposite to that. I'm very much a right brain creative and have struggled with, balance, which is pretty much what I teach now.
Yes. And I love the fact that you're pointing it out that selling is solving. And it's such a different way to think about selling as well. Most people who are entrepreneurs, I've found through all my years of coaching, as soon as you start hitting on the topic of selling, it is almost the fear immediately creeping in and them going, oh my gosh, I'm not quite sure how I need to sell. Is there a how-to guide on how I need to sell my product or my service? But I love the fact that you're saying selling is solving. And I think once you kind of get over that kind of whole concept of what it really means, really connecting with it, it makes a huge difference. And this is something that you can kind of relate to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of us feel that we can sell something if we really believe in it, and we can also sell something when it's not that personal. The problem with coaches and with creatives, who I'll talk about in a bit, and anything that's very close to our heart, is that we are selling ourselves, and that feels a little bit too vulnerable.
Yeah.
And we also get all kind of messed up in terms of our who I need to be and what I need to be to do that. So yeah, it's fine. I think if you're, well, it's bad enough, let's say, if you're selling a product that is completely not to do with you. For example, I was selling switches and hubs and telephone systems and call centers and all sorts of stuff back in the day. And that was that, you know, it's hard enough as it is. But then when you come to sell yourself and your business or your skill set or something you've created, then it is very, very personal. And I think the issue there is because you are virtually the product, then talking about yourself at all invokes these feelings of, you know, will I come across as being arrogant? Will they think I'm full of myself? And of course, nobody wants to appear like that. So it kind of messes with our head a little bit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. In more ways than one. I can definitely relate to that. And I think for some of the audience here watching this or listening to the podcast as well, they feel that's me. I'm putting my hand up. That's definitely how I feel, or even how you used to feel, because let's face it, it's a journey. It's a constant development as and when you grow within your business or in your industry. The other thing that I wanted to ask you is your journey from obviously where you've started to now kind of developing your own business, because I know this is now something as well that you're doing on the side, but you're working with a lot of creatives. Talk to us a little bit about that and how that kind of evolved.
Sure, yeah. So, as you say, these journeys of ours are epic hero journeys, aren't they? And mine went from that corporate mindset and environment that I kind of spent my kind of 30s and 40s, etc., in, to a point where I really was burned out twice. And that manifested itself with 2 bouts of breast cancer.
Goodness.
And in 2010, I had my first occurrence with it, and it came back in the same side in 2014. And because of, I think, you know, a lot for me was to do with stress. Everybody's journey with cancer is very different, isn't it? And you don't want to ever say anything that will, you know, offend anyone or, you know, say that this is the same for everybody, because it just isn't. But for me, it was very much an awakening journey to where I needed to make changes in my life, because I wasn't treating myself really well. I was eating on the road, in the car. I was traveling hundreds of miles a week. There was a lot going on, and my personal life was disintegrating as well. You know, classic deconstruction, where everything seems to go into to the wall, and that led me to a few things, which included reconnecting with my own creativity. As I said earlier, I've always been a creative person, but I kind of denied that side of me, thinking it was an indulgence. And so whilst I was off sick, I'd just sort of finished chemo. I was very bald and wobbly at home, and it was going to be my birthday coming up. And I Googled songwriting courses, and I started to take courses in songwriting. I found a tribe of people who I really loved being with, who were creatives, who, you know, made stuff up all the time. Now, in my corporate mindset, it was very dangerous to just say something spur of the moment without doing your research and knowing your stuff and having the right answer, or saying something really insightful. But these guys were doing the exact opposite, and it really challenged me mentally, but it also made me feel, in the circumstances, which was quite surprising, it just made me feel alive and gave me an injection of energy that I didn't anticipate. So as a result of that, I started to really notice some of the behaviours of my newfound creative friends, which were amazing at what they did, but they couldn't express themselves in terms of selling and networking and promoting themselves and pitching themselves. Now, if you're an artist, you're more likely to be okay with that. But if you're a musician or a songwriter or a producer, it's probably, depending on your personality, somewhat less natural. So these guys were kind of surprising in that they struggled with that. And I just knew I could help them, because that's what I've been doing my whole life. And that's how that started.
That's fantastic. And I love your story, because the first time you and I met as well, and you kind of told me that story, it just, it just resonated, but also it made so much sense for that kind of creative side of the mind, you know, not having the analytical part always running along and vice versa. So, you know, it's just amazing. And I'm glad that you kind of walked on that journey where you kind of felt where, you know, working with creatives is a great way because it's uplifting for you, but also you can help them out with the kind of parts that they need help with, which is obviously selling their services and their products as well. And I think this kind of segues into what you want to teach us today, which is all about how selling is one of the best tools that we can really have, especially as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. So I'm just going to hand over to you. Just go to town and just tell us, what is selling? How can we use it as a great tool in order to grow our businesses?
So firstly, the word selling has such negative connotations to it that sometimes it's better to park it. But having said that, and thank you for that invitation, it is something that I found both in myself and working with others, both my executive clients as well as my creative clients. So I work with the two hemispheres of the brain, if you like, and we know our brain doesn't work in halves. However, there are certain characteristics that analogy really represents. So the very, very left-brained, linear thinking, logical, kind of more corporate client will sometimes struggle with emotional connection when they're trying to sell what they do. My musician friends and clients are very emotionally connected, but they struggle with structure. And so bringing the two halves together in balance to utilize both of those sets of skills is really what kind of differentiates what I do from a lot of other coaches, I think. Of course, what that bit in the middle is the golden thread that knits the two together, is that neither of those extremes think of themselves as salespeople. And most of us don't unless you're in a sales role. Mm. And yet, pretty much everything we do is about selling. It's about convincing somebody or persuading somebody to do something with us, for us, or whatever. And so what helps, I've found, to make that easier is if you really do the groundwork before you even start the selling process. And the groundwork for me is inner work. And I talk about inner alchemy because I've had to go through that myself when I was on my journey to recovery, is sort out all my inner blocks, limiting beliefs, emotional trauma, just baggage, basically, stuff that we haven't dealt with. And there's a really good reason we haven't dealt with that, is because it's really painful and we don't want to look at it. But when we're really connected to ourselves and we've done some of that inner work, it really helps to free us up to be able to express ourselves without that kind of stuff, that noise that goes around in our heads, which says, who am I? You know, I'm not worthy of whatever it is, fill in the blank. What will they think of me? You know, they'll think X, Y, Z. There's all this stuff that really gets in the way. But even if you kind of have to sell something this afternoon, some things that can help you, you know, some quick wins, quick tips. And that is to really understand why you're doing what you're doing, why you're saying what you need to say, what's your message, what's your kind of reason for being, and that purpose, that sense of purpose, and the benefit that the other person will get from whatever it is you want them to buy or enroll in, is what you need to keep front and center in your mind, because ultimately it's not about you, it's about them. Yeah. So if you turn around everything that you were going to sell, you were going to say in your selling, so I do this and I do that, and it has these features and it has these things and it's this and much money. If you turn all of that around to, what do you need? When do you need that? Why is that going to be good for you? You know, think about the other person and what they're hearing more than what you're saying. Yeah. It immediately takes the pressure off you, and it puts the onus on will this help them? So if you're helping somebody, then that's not an issue, right?
Yeah.
We all like to help people. So just reframing it and turning it around to understand what's needed rather than what you're pushing, because the energy behind it is absolutely critical. So if you are trying to, we've all been in those situations, haven't we, where you're maybe walk into a store and you're just browsing, you're doing your research, you're trying to figure out what you want, and some sales guy or girl comes over and goes, can I help you today? And depending on whether they're laid back and kind of friendly and nice and genuinely helping, or they're trying to get a sale, you feel a different way. And when you tune into what you're feeling, it's almost like they're invading your space. Their energy is kind of crawling all over you and making you feel really icky. And it's that kind of traditional sales guy, foot in the door, shiny suit, smarmy kind of feeling that we hate. So we don't want to be anywhere near that, and it repels us instantly. But if you're kind of waiting and sitting back, but asking the right questions and really understanding what it is that this person is looking for, what they're needing, you know, how you might be able to help them, and your energy is more centered, then they will move towards you. Maybe even not physically, but in their energy, they will lean in more rather than you having to kind of pull, you know, they're, you know, you're pulling them in rather than pushing anything on them.
I know I've had similar experiences. Sorry to interrupt you. I've had similar experiences when I started selling for the first time. And this was in corporate. This wasn't even in my own business. But you are so, how can I say, you're so needy for that sale that you don't realize your energy is projecting that. And actually with your energy projecting that, you're pushing that potential customer or client away rather than coming from a point of helping, solving a problem. And once you have that different kind of mindset and energy, that's where the attraction starts happening.
Absolutely. And it, you know, there's a lot of you know, more kind of spiritual concepts coming into business. It's I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that this is a much more conscious way of being. It's a much more intelligent, emotionally intelligent way of being, and the beingness of it is more feminine as well. Yeah. You know, we hold that space for someone to tell us what they need, rather than the more forceful, more masculine doing energy of you need to do this, or asking those manipulative closing questions. You know, it's like, do you want it on Monday or Tuesday? You know, we kind of we see right through that stuff, don't we? Yeah. So I think people are a lot more open now to a different way of doing that.
Yeah.
And there's different dynamics in the marketplace. You know, salespeople are not the trusted experts that they once were. You can pretty much Google anything or watch a how-to on YouTube, and that's, you know, a fairly recent innovation, and people are far more educated about what they want, so you don't have to do that whole kind of education thing so much that you used to be able to do.
And I find that as well, and particularly because of the, you know, the internet being globally connected with people through technology. The one thing that I find the most interesting is that energy is still true, not just on a face-to-face conversation, but even now. I mean, we've got a screen and a camera between the two of us, but we can feel each other's energy. And if you are trying to sell your service to me now, I would feel your energy, even just through technology. And that is something that has kind of resonated with me when I started my business, because I realized how powerful and also how fortunate we are to be in situations where we can use technology to our advantage. But it is still that selling front about how we come forth in order to help our clients or our customers by solving their problems. And which is why I love you saying that it's not about selling, it's about solving. But that also kind of walks very much in hand with the kind of relationship you're building with that potential customer or client, whether they trust you, they know you, they like you, all those kind of factors all come into play. And I'm sure that is something that we can talk about for hours on end from your side. But what I want to know is, when it comes to having the kind of energy, that is something that doesn't just happen overnight. You need to train yourself. Am I right for saying that?
You do, yeah. I like to think of it as unlearning what we've learned badly, especially if you are a trained salesperson. But even if you're not, you know, the fact that we're already uncomfortable with having to sell, we communicate that discomfort. So that, you know, we can only give off what we're being. And this is where the inner work comes in again, this inner alchemy. It's about, you know, do you ever check in with your own energy before you turn up to a meeting or have a conversation? Do you center and ground yourself and you know, maybe shake off any of the negativity that you might have had in the last meeting, for example? And I don't think many of us necessarily do that in business. And those practices can really help free up the communication lines between the two or more parties. And that, again, it's about inner work. It's, you can only bring to the table what you are and who you are being in that moment. You know, if anybody's ever watched professional golfers, you know, they have to, mindset is everything, right? And they have to shake off whatever happened on the last shot before they approach the next shot. Because if they bring that with them, they're pretty much not going to have a good shot. It's exactly the same. And that we can take a lot of analogies and practices from the sporting world and bring them into business, like having coaches, which of course is common in sports for different things, nutrition, you know, your training, all kinds of mindset. So who are you being? So you've got to figure out that, as well as what are you going to do. So the being and the doing are the other, you know, aspects to this. There's a lot of interdimensional relationships at play: being, doing, feminine, masculine, inner, outer. You know, we have to kind of consider all of this complexity, because we are very complex as beings, and we are human beings, not human doings. So it's kind of, who are you being? And when you kind of look at that, and then you might not like what you see or not be getting the results you want, because the universe is a feedback loop, you get the reality you're projecting. And that's one of the harshest realities of all, that you're doing it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's a really hard thing for your ego to accept. And it took, you know, me being ill twice to really face a lot of that. If it's not what you want, if it's not the results you desire, not the things you're, you know, intending, then you need to look inside, because that's the origination of everything that you're manifesting.
Yes. One of the other things that I've had my students ask me a lot is, when they are trying to pitch a sale, obviously, do they need to have something ready? Do they need to have something prepared up front, and how they're going to pitch a sale? And you said something as well that kind of is really, I like it actually so much so. Winging it is okay. And I'm using your words here. And I want to hear from your perspective what you meant by that.
So the answer is yes and no. You can wing it, but only if you've done loads of preparation beforehand. So that's a complete paradox. But let me explain. When you're trying to understand what your key messages are, why somebody should be interested in what you're doing, the clarity that kind of homework, that groundwork brings is invaluable. Because a lot of us, when we are asked, what do you do? Which is typically, say you're at a networking event and somebody says, what do? You'll come out with a list of things you can do, or a job title. Now, depending on the event, many other people in that room could be exactly the same as you. If I just said to you, I'm a coach, well, I might be at a networking event with lots of other coaches, and that doesn't differentiate me. So understanding your unique value, what you bring individually, what your key messages are, what results you get, how do you do that? That takes some thought, it takes some homework, it takes some practice. And it definitely takes practice in saying that well.
Mm.
So it's very, it's absolutely critical that you do that work. Because if you are just to turn up and start winging it in a unprepared way, then you've nothing to draw on that is really bringing clarity or differentiation. So the great thing about doing that work, though, is that when you do it, you connect authentically to that message. So that's almost like you're connecting something from, within your soul, which sounds a bit deep for a business conversation, but it's true.
Yeah, it is.
If that's your reason for getting out of bed in the morning, that's why you do what you do, and you want to articulate that well, then you have to understand it in real detail. So it's very much like a persona or avatar work that you're doing in a traditional marketing sense, but you're doing it from a very deep place within you. And that produces two things. One, you feel like you're expressing it well, and the winging it comes to varying that message. So you can go either side of it very easily once you understand it in its core. And two, when you say that and it's coming from an authentic place, it doesn't feel salesy anymore. It's your purpose. So you automatically get rid of that whole awkwardness around it, because this is true for you, really deeply true. And so once you've done that, which is why my artist brand is called Authentic Artists, you are able then to draw on that at the drop of a hat. You can, classic elevator pitch, right? You can say that, draw on it in an unexpected situation. But you can then also vary it depending on what the situation is or the person that you're speaking with.
Yes. And I love the fact that you're saying it's all about still doing your homework up front, still being prepared, but then depending on what situation you're in, you can then obviously pull from those kind of resources and that research that you've already done. And then if you need to wing it, you're safe, you're okay to do it, but you can't just wing it out of the blue without having that kind of backup supporting you as you're going through conversations or even a sales pitch.
Well, you can, but you'll be less effective.
Yes. Well, you might walk out without the sale, that's for sure.
That's a risk, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that's really interesting about that is, whether you're a more creative person or a more left-brained logical person, and we're all a bit of a mixture, but whatever is dominating for you, the thing is with the corporate stuff, with the more left-brained, scientifically approached kind of thinking, is that the bit over here, the right brain, the play, the creativity, that's where innovation lives.
Yeah.
And so, we really have an imbalance in the world, because we're moving from this kind of industrial kind of age, revolution age, to the information age, or we have moved into that. But the next stage of that, if you consult any of the experts and the forward thinkers, is one of innovation.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely polar opposite to all our schooling. That's what, we've been taught how to learn things by rote, memorize, do exams. That isn't the kind of groove that we need to be in if we're going to innovate, create and disrupt. So the solutions we need to bring to the world are about learning how to be creative. And yet, as I was, not many, a lot of people are not as comfortable in that space.
Yeah.
So like I said, unlearning certain things is absolutely crucial for us to regain that balance.
Yeah. Gosh, that is so good. Jacqueline, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Before we conclude this podcast interview, obviously, let's talk a little bit about obviously, number one, where people can get a hold of you, but you also have what you call a virtual coffee or a discovery call. Talk to us a little bit about that and how people can get a hold of you.
Thank you. So I have two websites and presences online because they are written for those different markets, for the left brainers and the right brainers. So the creatives amongst you may want to think about how you put more structure around what you do. And authentic-artist.com is my online presence for that, and all associated social media links will be on there. For my more corporate clients, I have a brand called Aurate, Aurate, and aurate.co.uk is the website for that. And that is really the more executive level. The artist side tends to be more emerging artists who need help getting their business off the ground. But it also looks at people who are more established as well, but they tend to be more in the executive track. But that's where you can find me.
Amazing. And what we'll do is we'll have the links for all of those down below in the show notes. So if you want to go get connected with Jacqueline, by all means, go there, click on the links, and it will obviously take you directly to her. Jacqueline, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time on the podcast. Is there any final tips or notes that you would like to share with the audience?
Yeah, let me think of something. We're, as you said in your opening comments, we're all on a journey, and mine's been one of a lot of going into my shadows, into my inner dark places that are, not necessarily very pleasant and can be quite scary. And I would just, I'm not a mental health expert, but I would just encourage anybody who's going through any of that, whether it's yourself or someone you know, to just reach out and talk to somebody, because we're all really just walking each other home, aren't we? Yes. And I would not have got well again without the support of a lot of people who I was brave enough to open up to. And coaching is, the reason I love coaching is because that I've had an amazing coach, well, a few amazing coaches, and so there is no shame in that, needing support, and it was something I held off of getting for a very long time, until it was pretty much life or death, and I wouldn't want that for anyone else. So please reach out, and if it's not to me or you, whoever you trust in your life, yes, because there is always help at hand.
Yes, and I agree with what you're saying. I always use the analogy that we're all so unique. We've all got our own unique journey we're going on, but during that journey, you almost feel like you're alone. You're doing all of this on your own. But as soon as you start looking left and right, you'll see other people who's actually on their own unique journeys, but they're walking alongside of you, and you just need to reach out to them. That's all you need to do, which is why I love, talking to entrepreneurs such as yourself, having you on the podcast, sharing your success story, and also just collaborating with people from all over the world and just having amazing conversations to uplift each other. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time on the podcast, and I wish you all of the best for everything you're accomplishing, and I will keep definitely in touch for any future successes. And it's going to be amazing.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Take care.